Again, please take your seats. We need to start the meeting. I call the meeting of General Committee on Democracy, Human Rights and Humanitarian Questions to order. The agenda for this meeting has been distributed. I invite all members of this committee to adopt the agenda. Are there any objections? No. The agenda is adopted. Nominations for election of committee officers have closed at this moment. We now continue considering the fifth supplementary item referred to us by the Standing Committee, the security challenges of migration. I think it's not Mr. Kovalev because I'm not seeing Mr. Kovalev in the room. Maybe Mrs. Kozlova from Russia to propose the Amendment 9. Okay.
Уважаемая госпожа председатель, будет докладывать вместо Ковалева Зинуров. Мы предлагаем в 9 пункте после слов «проблем в области безопасности» ставить следующие слова: «от растущей угрозы террористических актов» и далее по тексту. Почему мы этого желаем? Недавние теракты в Париже, в Бельгии, в Стамбуле показали, что люди гибнут именно от террористических актов. Это главная угроза сегодня безопасности в Европе, да и во всем мире. Просим это учесть и поддержать. И попутно хочу выразить соболезнования коллегам из Турции по поводу недавних страшных терактов в Стамбуле. Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against? No. Mrs. Dovezova, your opinion, please.
I can agree with this amendment and I support it.
I shall now put Amendment 9 to the vote. Those who wish to vote in favor, please raise your cards. Those who wish to vote against, please raise your cards. Abstentions? The amendment is adopted. 33 votes against, in favor, please excuse me. 33 votes in favor, 7 votes against, 5 abstentions. The Amendment 9 is adopted. Amendment 10, I call Mrs. Gara from Greece to propose this amendment.
Though we comprehended the emphasis on security, we think that the current migration phenomenon is an unprecedented situation and we need to tackle it collectively. The use of the term concern is broad enough to encompass all the challenges linked to migration, which is a complex and multifaceted phenomenon. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm seeing one inscription from Belgium. It was the first. I'm seeing now another one from Austria, but Belgium made this inscription first. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have just a question because my colleague and I, we use different languages. We speak both, and we see in paragraph 9, a difference in text, and it's not clear for us what the meaning is. In English, it's mentioned as well as to address security and other concerns stemming from this particular challenge. I comprehend this referring to other concerns. En français, c'est aux autres préoccupations en matière de sécurité qui découlent de ce défi particulier. Les autres préoccupations refaire jusqu'à la sécurité et pas aux les autres concerns as in English is mentioned. That's the question. We don't know what the meaning is of paragraph 9 because there is difference between the two languages.
We are going to see what happened with translations, but the original version is the version in English. And is that is valid for this discussion now.
Thank you.
Someone? Technical problems? Okay, please.
Dear Mrs. Chairman, due to the fact that Amendment 9 that was agreed and Amendment 10 are in contact with the same paragraph 9, in accordance to the previous method we solved it, like it was with Amendment 4 and 5, if one proposal to the same paragraph is accepted, there is no vote about the second change of the paragraph.
In that case, it was because it was for delete the paragraph. It's not what we are discussing.
It was not delete the paragraph, it was delete the words.
Okay. But
Central part, it doesn't
just
replace the
1
word
minute.
difference.
No, it doesn't. It
This
doesn't.
doesn't replace
Yeah,
the words that this refers to.
yeah. So that's still possible
Those
to have.
words are still in the paragraph
Yeah.
as amended.
Okay.
So there's no.
One is that the words that are proposed to us to delete now, they still remain in the paragraph. They still remain in the original version. Okay? Someone wish to speak against, or is a point of order? It's to speak against. Austria, please. The floor is yours.
Ich melde mich, Frau Vorsitzende, ich melde mich nicht zur Geschäftsordnung, aber ich weise darauf hin, dass sich der belgische Einwand gegen den ursprünglichen Text gerichtet hat und jetzt aber durch die Annahme des Amendment 9 ein neuer Text gilt. Also soweit ich die Belgier verstanden habe. Aber ich spreche jetzt zu Amendment 10. Ich sehe keinen Grund für eine Streichung, denn ganz im Gegenteil, die Zusammenarbeit mit den Herkunftsländern ist eine große Herausforderung. Und das kann und darf man ruhig auch so nennen. Das sollte im Text erhalten bleiben.
Mrs. Dovezova, your opinion, please.
I am against.
I shall now put Amendment 10 to the vote. Those who wish to vote in favor, please raise your cards. Those who wish to vote against, please raise your cards. Abstentions? The amendment is defeated. 25 votes in favor, 31 against, 2 abstentions. That concludes the consideration of amendments. Thank you very much. I propose that we now formally move to a vote on draft resolution as amended. Those who wish to vote in favor of draft resolution as amended, please raise your cards. Those who wish to vote against this draft resolution as amended, please raise your cards. Abstentions? The draft resolution is adopted. 44 votes in favor, 18 against, 4 abstentions. We now move to consideration of the sixth supplementary item referred to us by the Standing Committee, integrating gender-based analysis and gender mainstream in the response to the migrant and refugee crisis. There are 5 amendments to this item. I give the floor to Mrs. Fry from Canada, to the sponsor of this draft resolution.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have seen that starting in 2012, when we looked at the types of migrants and refugees that were actually coming and having an influx into Europe, that in fact the majority were men. Since then, and over the last 2 to 3 years, we have seen that statistical data change a great deal. And now we have 20% of migrants as women and 35% as their children. So we're looking at women and children making up 55% of the flows. And I think what we wanted to have everyone understand is that at the very beginning of why someone is a migrant and why they must leave, we can understand why women are leaving. Women are leaving because they're fleeing conflict, but many of them are not in conflict areas. Many of them are fleeing gender-related and gender-based violence. Secondly, we have seen that a lot of women are fleeing poverty because, in fact, the United Nations tells us that poverty has a feminine face, that it is women and children who tend to live in global poverty, so that they are seeking to flee poverty as well as violence. I think we know that when they reach the shores, their ability to have the means and the resources to get here is usually compromised, so many of them are immediately at risk. They're at risk from exploitation by organized crime, who seeks, in fact, to have women and their children have sexual services being sold in order to get from A to B. We know that women and children, when they reach camps or they're crossing border, that they have been at risk from border guards and from humanitarian aid workers and from many other people, merely because some of these women are alone and they have very young girls with them, and in fact young boys as well, who need to help their parents to survive, and in fact they're engaged in sexual services and they're vulnerable. So we know that the history from the moment you leave as a woman and a girl to the moment that you arrive in a camp in a country that is hosting you, is that we find that there is need for adequate housing for these women, safe housing, because a lot of women are afraid to stay in camps, and we know that there are many women who are staying on beaches now because it's open and everyone can see them, and that they are able, therefore, to at least have some measure of security. But we need to look at secure housing. The other thing we need to do is to look at the issue of excuse me, Madam Chair. I am sorry. Someone is standing in front of me while I'm trying to speak.
Yes, you are right.
Thank you very much, Madam
We
Chair.
need conditions
Yes.
to work. I call to everyone who is in this room, please, let us work. Give us conditions.
So, Madam Chair, what I just wanted to say is that we also know that, in fact, if we attend to gender sensitivity now from the day that a refugee or migrant leaves until the moment that they reach a host country, that there are so many risks for women and children, and that we believe that it is important that all of the nation states, 57 nation states, start looking at training, at a code of conduct for people at borders, at a code of conduct for people in the camp, to looking at, in fact, finding ways to have gender-sensitive policies. These are all very important. We also know that a lot of these women come here, many of them are pregnant, many of them require reproductive health services, and this is not necessarily available to them. So that we're talking about helping these women and children to be healthy, to be well-nourished, to be able to live, have better services in healthcare. These are one of the things that we think are very important to look at. And so we're saying, let us take an approach that looks at every step of the way from women and girls as they come from a country to their host country, and look at the risks, try to diminish them, and try to find ways where we can get many females who are looking after some of these women whom they feel comfortable with, especially if they're pregnant and if they are ill. And so we're talking about looking at best practices, and there are, Madam Chair, lots of best practices around the OSCE that we can follow through. The European Union has really good list of practices. The European Parliament has been looking at that. And so we need to look at how we assist women and be gender sensitive. One final thing, I would like us to look at the root causes, and one of them is not just poverty, one of them is actually conflict. And I think the issue of conflict is that if we get women to become involved in conflict prevention from the beginning, because they are so vulnerable, we know that they become very engaged. We know that statistics and studies have shown us that they have been very successful within prevention of the issues that concern them back home, and we also find that they are able to sustain redevelopment in their home countries. And one last thing, Madam Chair, is that as we look at preventing migration, preventing people to leave their homes, we know most people don't want to leave their homes. Where there is no conflict and where we are able to prevent conflict, we need to start thinking about how we give developmental aid to countries in which women and children live in poverty and in which people are seeking to find a better life for themselves and their children. We know, Madam Chair, all of us, that we have families, and we know that we will do anything to help our families to be able to survive and to have a better life. So if we can help in the home country to have good developmental aid, that may be one way of preventing some of the reasons that we have so many women and children migrants. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
The floor is now open for debate. I have till now one inscription. In the end of this speech, I'll end the inscriptions. Mr. Ratanzi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mrs.
No
Ratanzi,
problem.
excuse
Don't
me.
worry. I commend Dr. Hedy Fry for bringing this supplementary item forward, and the many co-sponsors for supporting the initiative. Madam Chair, the supplementary item addresses two important issues for our times. gender mainstreaming, and the migrant and refugee influx. The supplementary item advocates a very simple idea, that migrant and refugee women and girls deserve to be treated with dignity and to be safe. We have all committed to providing such protections to women and girls on our territory, and we must respect those obligations. This requires decision makers to consider, number one, gender at every step of their planning as they respond to the large number of people arriving in Europe through irregular channels. Number two, it involves having people on the ground with gender expertise to assist women and girls who have experienced gender-based violence and to point out where women are being negatively affected by the way services are organized and given to them. Number three, it requires separate sleeping quarters and single-sex, well-lit washrooms, as the supplementary item notes. These are basic safety measures that we would expect in countries with far fewer resources than those where the current crisis is taking place. I would therefore urge all of us to do more to protect the women and girls that are arriving on European shores. Supporting this supplementary item is one small step in that direction. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have till now another inscription, and I don't have more inscriptions. Mr. Holm from Sweden.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I could only agree with the previous speakers. I think this is an important and good resolution, bringing up a topic that is always on the agenda. I think it's good also to stress reproductive health and rights services, and also, of course, in general, but in this migration and refugee crisis that we see, it's clear that we have to focus on these issues, and I think that Mrs. Fry have done a great job in presenting this resolution, so full support for it. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move to consideration of the amendments submitted to draft resolution. Copies of the amendments have been made available. The correct version is entitled AS 16 SI 8 Amend. Amendments 1 and 2. Amendments 1 and 2, both related to pregnant and nursing women and their children. I will therefore group the amendments together for discussion. I call Mr. Smith from United States to speak to these amendments.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. According to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, a large number of pregnant women or women with babies and small children are among the refugees coming to Europe, close quote. These women and children have special medical and nutritional needs that, if neglected, will impact their lives and health for their entire lifetime. Madam Chair, it has been absolutely established that adequate nutrition and supplementation during the first 1,000 days of life from conception until the second birthday significantly enhances child's brain development, physical growth, and boosts immunity to disease. I would quote, and we have a list of quotations for all the members at your seats. The World Food Program says, children without access to an adequate diet in the first 1,000 days between conception and 2 years of age suffer irreversible long-term consequences such as impaired physical and cognitive development. The United Nations itself said the first 1,000 days of life from conception to age 2 presents a critical window of opportunity. Good nutrition and healthy growth in this period will have a lasting benefit throughout the child's life. UNICEF, the UN Children's Fund, says that the report stresses a focus on protecting children from conception to the age of 2. If a child fails or falls behind during this critical development stage, he or she may never catch up. UNICEF also points out that these first 2 years are forever. The next 25,000 or 30,000 days in the life of a human being are really set during those first 1,000 days. This amendment also emphasizes important things like access to prenatal care, to help nursing women. Again, nutrition is the key to all of this. I would hope that members would look at these handouts because the evidence is absolute. It's more than overwhelming, and I yield back.
Does anyone wish to speak against? I saw the inscription of Mr. Holm. I don't know if it's to speak against. Okay, please.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Chair. First of all, I want to congratulate my American colleagues on their Independence Day today. And I don't disagree on the wordings within the amendments as such. I think it's fully correct to stress the importance of good health care and nutrition for women during pregnancy and also the first years of the life in the child. What I'm a little bit hesitant to is that we write here about the first 1,000 days before the child is 2 years old, which including the time of pregnancy. And I think that's the moral discussion whether a child is a child straight from the pregnancy and or when it's delivered. And given that fact, I would recommend to go for the wordings within the resolution as it's presented, and therefore I will also vote against the amendments. Thank you very much.
What is Mr. Fry's opinion of the amendments?
Madam Chair, I understand, and it is actually very much evidence-based about the development of a child's brain. And so I think this issue of good nutrition until age 2 is very supportable. I am a little concerned about the language because as a physician I can tell you that we do not speak of the child until it is a child and it's born. We speak of a woman during pregnancy. So a woman who is pregnant and requires this nutrition, as Mr. Smith said here, which is indeed very true. So I am just concerned about the ambiguity of some of the language, and I think that, Madam Chair, I don't know if it's possible for me to ensure that Mr. Smith can explain the ambiguity of the language, because it's not medically acceptable to say from the moment of conception that it is a child. We speak of it as a fetus. And so I think until then, we wanted to be sure about the language, Mr. Smith.
Please, Mr. Smith.
Thank you.
Explain.
First of all, we are talking about an unborn child, a newborn child until the age of 2. The fact that the United Nations, UNICEF, World Food Program, and experts, including the Scaling Up program, to which almost 40 countries now are a part of, recognize that if you get it right in the first 1,000 days, and I believe passionately that unborn children have worth, inherent value, that birth is an event that happens to all of us. It is not the beginning of life. And certainly ultrasound has shattered the myth that somehow an unborn child is less than human and less than alive. We know that they are alive and they are human. We know that the provision of folic acid in the first month after pregnancy, after conception, has a great mitigating impact on autism. I point out to my colleagues that in the United States, I'm the prime author of 3, count them 3, major laws on combating autism. We now know from the National Institutes of Health, 3 major studies, that if a woman has folic acid, 400 micrograms, up until the first month after conception, the incidence or prevalence of autism drops by about 40%. These first days, weeks, and months of that child's life are absolutely determinative as to how healthy they will be when they're 4 and 5 or 50 or 80. And in terms of cognitive development, stunting, 1/4 of all the children in the world, according to UNICEF, suffer from stunting, 1/4. that can be greatly reduced as well when during this period from conception to the second birthday, adequate nutrition and supplementation is provided to this child. And it also reduces, Madam Chair, maternal mortality as well as child mortality.
Thank you. It was one clarification of this amendment. I will give now, for her opinion, the floor to Mrs. Fry.
Madam Chair, again, I mean, as a physician, I do not disagree with Mr. Smith at all. There is ample evidence with regard to folic acid, etc. But I do think that the insidious message in some of this, where Mr. Smith actually speaks to the issue of when conception occurs that a child is alive, does not deal with the issue. And I don't want us to get rid of what I think is a very good supplementary item and a very good amendment, because we are bringing in ambiguity about certain issues that are not to be discussed in this item. This item is about gender-sensitive language with regard to refugees and women in need. I don't want us to get the issue muddled, and Mr. Smith's explanation muddled some of the issues, again, about when life starts, and that's not what we're discussing here. So I will have to vote against the amendment. Thank you.
I shall now put amendments 1 and 2 to a vote in turn. I shall now put Amendment 1 to the vote. Those who wish to vote in favor, please raise your cards. Votes against? Abstentions? You want to count with the yes? Okay. The amendment is defeated. 23 votes against, in favor, 34 against, 2 abstentions. Amendment 2. I shall now put Amendment 2 to the vote. Those who wish to vote in favor, please raise your cards. Those who wish to vote against, please raise your cards. Abstentions? The amendment was defeated. 19 votes in favor, 37 votes against, 2 abstentions. I call Mrs. Alimova from Russian Federation to propose Amendment 3.
Спасибо большое. Деятельность ОБСЕ в области обеспечения гендерного равенства и защиты прав женщин должна быть сбалансированной. Должное внимание, наряду с обеспечением равенства мужчины и женщины, должно уделяться вопросам защиты семьи, материнства и детства, а также развития социальных и культурных прав. Мы в своей поправке предлагаем исключить в пункте 13 слова «как это рекомендовано в плане действий ОБСЕ 2004 года по поддержке гендерного равенства». Дело в том, что в 13 пункте гораздо шире предлагается разрешение проблемы, чем это указано в плане действий. В то же время мы выступаем за разработку дополнений в плане действий ОБСЕ по гендерному равенству 2004 года. Спасибо.
Does anyone wish to speak against this amendment? No. Mrs. Fry, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Actually, the wording in the paragraph was taken directly from the plan, but I am pleased to hear that my colleague from the Russian Federation actually supports expanding from the 2004 plan into building on a new plan and a supplementary plan. I think this is very important, and I thank her for her support in that. But I would not like to see the words 2004 OSC Gender Action Plan, because with a lack of anything else, this is all we have to base some of our work on. Thank you.
I shall now put Amendment 3 to the vote. Those who wish to vote in favor? Those who wish to vote against? Abstentions? The amendment is defeated. 6 votes in favor, 40 votes against, 6 abstentions. Amendment 4, I call Mr. Rashkin from Russia Federation to propose Amendment 4.
Уважаемая госпожа председатель, дамы и господа, мы считаем, что эта поправка не соответствует тексту логически, так и правовом плане. Поэтому мы эту поправку отзываем. Этого требует объективная истина, и мы достаточно самокритичны в этом плане. Спасибо.
Any objections to the proposal of withdraw this amendment? The amendment is withdrawn. Amendment 5, I call Mrs. Lingerie from Belgium to propose Amendment 5.
Oui, merci Madame la Présidente. Les mariages d'enfants sont une pratique que nous ne pouvons pas tolérer. Chacun doit pouvoir choisir son conjoint de son plein gré et cela requiert évidemment qu'on doit être mature et aussi majeur. Et les mariages d'enfants sont d'ailleurs interdits dans de nombreux pays membres de l'OSCE. Mais avec l'arrivée de réfugiés, nous sommes confrontés avec ce nouveau phénomène. Plusieurs pays d'origine reconnaissent des mariages d'enfants. Même si nous ne pouvons pas tolérer cette pratique, il faut être prudent parce que souvent, on sépare les conjoints dès qu'ils sont arrivés dans nos pays. Et dans la plupart des cas, c'est aussi nécessaire, c'est une approche à recommander, mais dans d'autres cas, cela a un effet négatif vis-à-vis des personnes qui se trouvent déjà dans une situation précaire. Il faut alors tenir compte de la différence d'âge. Par exemple, s'il s'agit d'un homme syrien qui a 50 ans, qui est marié avec une fille de 16 ans, il est évident qu'on sépare les conjoints. Si par contre il s'agit d'un couple où le mari a 19 ans et la fille a 17 ans, là il faut voir si ils ont donné la fille était d'accord avec le mariage, oui ou non, donc si c'était de plein gré. Aussi, il faut tenir compte du lien affectif. Et en tout cas, il faut aussi tenir compte du droit international privé qui régit cette matière et voir si on peut valider le mariage, oui ou non, et si on peut annuler le mariage. Mais il faut tenir aussi compte de le droit international privé. Merci de soutenir cet amendement.
Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 5? Anyone? I shall now, before that, I'll ask to Mrs. Fry for her opinion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I support this amendment.
I shall now put Amendment 5 to the vote. Those who wish to vote in favor, please raise your cards. It's better announce, as we announced till now. Those who wish to vote against, abstentions. The amendment is adopted. 48 votes in favor, 0 votes against, 1 abstention. That concludes the consideration of amendments. Thank you. I propose that we now formally move to a vote on the draft resolution as amended. Those who wish to vote in favor of this draft resolution, please raise your cards. Those who wish to vote against, please raise your cards. Abstentions? The draft resolution is adopted. 50 votes in favor, 0 votes against, 6 abstentions. We now come to the election of committee officers for the 2017 annual session of the Assembly. Nominations closed at 11:30 a.m. The International Secretariat informs me that the following nominations have been received in the table office. For Chair, Mr. Ignacio Sanchez Amor from Spain. For Vice President, Mrs. Ivana Dovezova, Czech Republic. For Rapporteur, Mrs. Gordana Chomic from Serbia, and Mr. Kyriakos from Cyprus. For the conduct, please remain quiet because we are still working. For the conduct of elections, I will hand over the International Secretariat. I have appointed Mr. Beckervold from Norway, Mrs. Neelan from Switzerland, and Mrs. Fry from Canada as tellers to oversee the conduct of the election and to counting of the votes. As the position Oh, no, no, please, the director of the elections to read. It's not me, it's you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We'll then continue. As the position of chair is not contested, I declare the nominee for that position, Mr. Ignacio Sanchez Amor from Spain, elected by acclamation. Likewise, as the position of vice chair is not contested, I declare the nominee for that position, Ms. Ivana Dobesheva from the Czech Republic, elected by acclamation. As the position of rapporteur is contested, we will have an election by secret ballot. I remind you that the candidates are Ms. Gordana Chomic from Serbia and Mr. Kyriakou Hadjiani from Cyprus. Ballot papers have been prepared for the election. To vote, please place a cross by the name of your preferred candidate. According to Rule 36(5), a majority of votes cast is required for a candidate to be elected. In the event of a tie, this issue shall be decided by lot. Please come to the podium to collect your ballot paper. You must have your voting card with you and show your blue badge. The committee will be suspended while the votes are counted and will then resume for the result to be announced. We have found an iPhone. If anybody has lost their phone, please come up to the podium.
it's yours. Result. And this is the result of the election for the Rapporteur of General Committee on Democracy, Human Rights and Humanitarian Questions. Mrs. Gordana Chomic from Serbia, 31 votes. Mr. Kyriakos Adjiani from Cyprus, 40 votes. Seventy-two members have voted. There were one spoiled ballot paper. Mr. Kyriakos Adjiani is accordingly elected rapporteur. This concludes the work of the third committee for the 25th annual session. I would like to thank colleagues for their most constructive cooperation in the work of the committee. I would like also to say thank you to my friends and the vice chair of this committee, Mrs. Dobezova, to Mrs. Gordana Chomic, that it was the rapporteur till this moment, and to our great staff during this meeting and during all this time, and to all of you, thank you very much. I'm very honored to were president of this committee, and now it's finally my goodbye, my dear fellows. Bye-bye. Thank you.